2020. While I had a number of great games on that horizon, there were certainly ones that led to much disappointment. While thankfully few, there were ones that really counted, and it really hurts talking about it in some cases. Here on this list will include games that I didn't necessarily purchase and played it myself, but I anticipated myself to be a good game at some point, only led to be, well, disappointed. Now, before we go into the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that button, and don't forget to hit the bell to notify all. That's how you know when more videos come out on this channel. So, without further ado, here are my top 4 disappointing games of 2020. Number 4.
He's kindly stepped up to establish order.
Understand this. I will not allow anyone, not even myself, to jeopardize this.
He will stop at nothing to permanently control the city.
London will be the first city in the world to be made truly safe.
Watchdogs Legion. Watchdogs Legion initially looked interesting. The idea of infinitely recruiting members of all shapes and sizes and even age to your group. In this cyber hack heavy side of London as an open world game, I decided to, somewhere down the road, put this on the back burner before release, as other games I'd rather play were coming out also around at that same time window. That move turned out to be the smart move, as reviews revealed the repetitive nature of things and certain limitations that made the overall novelty with weaker execution. Not to mention it lacked the freedom of recruiting diverse array of NPCs, as you really only want to recruit the really good ones, basically limiting your expression on things. Although, yes, you can still roleplay, but you really want to do the former. On top of that, the game was released with a number of glitches that caused the PC versions to crash. While yes, you can create your own fun, as the game does offer the standard open world freedom, you can still roleplay as I said before, but it really still lacks that spice or seasonings and other important ingredients for a game to justify the purchase and time over other games. I'm likely not to pick this one up down the road. Like, pretty much, imagine a strawberry shortcake with subpar strawberries and the cream lacking the sugar. The foundation was certainly there, you know, the actual cake itself, but the execution was quite missed. I really did like this concept, admittedly, but this became a disappointment even after the delay and all that time to make the game enjoyable, optimized, and importantly, fun. Number 3.
What the? Right!
Let's try this again.
Marvel Avengers. I had more excitement for this game initially, thanks to that lingering high I had from the Marvel movies, especially from Avengers Endgame. But sometime down the line, whether it was before or after delay, I just kind of fell off from it. The excitement just waned off, frankly. By the time it released, judging from the reviews that were coming out at the time, I think I made that right decision as well, unfortunately, because turns out the story wasn't all that great. The gameplay, while it had its moments, didn't shine like players hoped for. It was just repetitive, it seemed like. The severe lack of customization, awful boss fights, bad post-game content. This game needed to be in the oven for longer for different reasons. In this case, it had its fair share of glitches. However, the game cried for more depth and love. It just had that too much of that corporation sort of nonsense that was thrown in there just for the sake of making money. The publishers of Square Enix really wanted this game to be one of those ongoing live service games like Anthem, and that was the biggest downfall, I felt, especially how they screwed that up. Its player base has shrunken dramatically at this point, so that exclusive DLC with Spider-Man for the PlayStation players, it's not gonna matter anymore. The game sucks. You're just better off playing the Spider-Man games, including Miles Morales. Number 2.
What the hell are you doing here?
You think I'd let you do this on your own?
Last of Us Part 2. People have their gripes about these cinematic video games, but that should not devalue the story about Joel and Ellie versus the fungal apocalypse. Importantly, the relationship of these two was so good, charming, wholesome, compelling. However, that got all shot down in Part 2 within the first few hours of playing the game. It just seemed like the creators and writers spat all over the Foundation in favor of a more cliched, artistic message, perhaps politically driven message. Instead of involving the previous story somehow, like you know, what a sequel's supposed to do, they wanted to take a different direction in order to tell a different tale. It wasn't the matter of Joel dying itself that was wrong. One can say, yeah, the writing is bold in essence, Joel dying very early in the story. But what matters is the execution, the believability, which was severely lacking in these key cutscenes. There was certainly shock factor, but no substance, no suspense, which are two of the very important elements to make it that effective. The overall message being told within the game isn't necessarily bad itself, but it just felt so shoehorned and believability is not present, and I just grew tired of it. The message of revenge is bad became the main focus of the game rather than the apocalypse itself. That never went anywhere else. It never evolved. Instead, it just became an afterthought. There was only like one enemy type and a boss that was cool, admittedly. The series just seemed to have lost its way. The ludicrous pacing made that impression all the more apparent, along with all the other flaws present in the game. Not to mention the unnatural changes in some characters by the end of the story, including Ellie, Tommy, Dina, etc., adding that much more to that disbelief. To me, The Last of Us is all about Joel and Ellie as well as the global infection. It just seemed like Ellie's immunity just didn't matter all that much beyond just the means of helping Ellie carrying out her revenge. Not only I wanted to see other story elements from the first game, I really wanted to see where Jolie and Ellie's relationship would go next. Previous story elements that were purposely left out would have debunked this awful storytelling in Part 2, especially if Joel told the wholehearted truth, or Abby actually reacting to her father treating the other immune survivors or patients. This game could have set up for multiple endings, whether Abby dies or lives, or Ellie's death could have been something to trigger something else. But this ending that we got, that's the ending that they really wanted to tell in this particular story. Abby being this sympathetic hero who got a revenge, while Ellie was the one they seemed to try to make the bad guy out of. For like what reason? And on top of all this, the game was allowed by Sony to show a graphic sex scene, which shows the hypocrisy of Sony in this particular case regarding to the censoring of erotic fan service that is prevalent in anime-esque games. The story could have been told in many better ways. Joel could have been the main villain for all I care. Abby could have been an ally of Joel and Ellie until the very end, once she really finds out who they are. The story could have split off into 2 modes. I just find it funny that the best part of part 2 were the flashback scenes. What do you know? With Joel and Ellie in their prime. Like, look, while I love the overall story here, the production value, however, for this game was something to credit for. Absolutely. The graphics, the performances from the actors, the music. However, the game itself, while fun, is more or less the same thing from the last game, with of course Abby thrown in there with her own abilities, some tweaks here and there, of course. Otherwise, it's an average game with production value, but with that polarizing, predictable story with awful pacing. I don't feel ill towards anyone who likes this game. That's totally fine. I get it. I just didn't get the experience that I was hoping for The Last of Us after 7 years of waiting. I just can't buy it. I can't buy the story that was presented here. You know, I just find it funny that this game was swept through the Game Awards, you know, with all the awards that it won. And of course, it won Game of the Year at the Game Awards, as, you know, I hope it didn't, but, you know, it is what it is. But at least it didn't win the award that was solely voted by the people. That really says something about that. And you know what? This game had a handful of glitches despite the crunch time. However, it pales in comparison to, well, you guessed it, number 1.
Welcome to Night City.
Yeah, come on.
The only limit to what you can do is what you're willing to become. So dream big. If you can hack it, the future's yours for the taking.
Cyberpunk 2077. Looking back from its announcement, the trailers, promotions, good press for CD Projekt Red from all the craze that it earned and grabbed from The Witcher 3 days, it's just so crazy that the people, you know, including myself, went from sheer hype, especially after that Keanu Reeves reveal, to the actual release day, despite the drama behind those delays. I really gotta open the can here. It's just sad, really, as much as I did put this game at number 5, right in the middle of my top games for 2020, you know, my personal list. It's number 1 here on the disappointing games list for 2020. Not only the bugs and glitches were just flat out terrible in every way, and it's a good laugh, of course, a number of promises and features were just missed. It becomes obvious that the game had a lack of that polish and nuance. It really shows that it needed more time in the oven. Absolutely. The police AI, abysmal. Literally thanking you for your service 1 minute, and the next, they just started blasting me. Like, what the hell? Like, what did I just do to provoke you guys? As I said before in my review, even if you do want to play the criminal, it's ridiculously easy to get away from the cops. I just felt like GTA's cops at 1 or 2 stars were pretty persistent. The stealth is super inconsistent at times. As soon as I kill someone who has noticed me, the rest of them, you know, either like ignores you, or just the entire building notices somehow and knows where you are exactly, even if they don't sound the alarm. That, you know, the person that was killed by you, They don't sound the alarm or make a single little peep. They just somehow freaking notice you and know where you are. Same thing on the streets. I shank someone in the alley, oh so silently, but somehow the cops just pop out of thin air and shoot me from behind. The AI in general was just so lopsided. 1 minute they have godlike accuracy, take cover, snipe your cyber head off, and then the next, they just act like the biggest buffoons and they don't know where to go or how to act properly as enemies, which ties with the police AI as well. NPCs do not feel organic as they just sit and have their hands out when you point their gun at them at times. It's just very inconsistent. That's the word for it. The gameplay side of things could have used some more depth. The gameplay felt clunky, but I did get used to it. The driving was just shitty, to be honest. I think we get the picture here. A lot of things felt arbitrary in Cyberpunk. The dialogue choices, while yes, mattered in some places, where it needed to matter, didn't matter. That's one of the points where the immersion was lost for me. Some of the hacking in the buildings or when you're hacking the enemy, that can feel arbitrary as well. It just doesn't really matter. You can just shoot them, you know what I mean? Also, the city life, despite having a lot of NPCs, just felt kind of hollow, fake, dry. They just kind of just walk around, drone on, and pretend to be people. And of course, buying all these cars just don't matter. It don't add up. It just doesn't add up to what it's supposed to be. There are no bounties on your head, so essentially you can just do whatever you want, I guess, in that sense. You do have that freedom, which is important in open world games. You do have that, I guess. Even by the end, where the dialogue choice mattered most, you don't get to live with those consequences. You don't. So really, the choices you make really don't matter all that much. As said before, it needed more time in the oven. Not only that, it needed to do away with the PS4 and Xbox One versions. Gotta say here, it sucks for those people, but it had to be done. The game needed to be the one to pave the way for the PlayStation 5 and Series X. This game was supposed to be very immersive, but that got all plagued by the mess that the devs needed more time to get all that cleaned up. We all know what's going on with this drama and stuff by this point, but boy, is it a mess. While they do deserve all the criticism about the game's quality at launch, it really just sucks to see how this is all unfolding and with all the consequences, even throwing in the lawsuits that are potentially possible from the investors. Because at this point, it is widely considered a scam, and which I do agree. I don't blame the gamers who felt that way. Games need to absolutely be ready by release date, not later. This game could have been monumental in gaming history. The greedy decisions from the higher-ups from CD Projekt Red made the disastrous choice of releasing the game sooner. Not to mention on those systems like PS4 and Series or Xbox One, excuse me. The game will forever live in infamy rather than famously. Imagine this. The higher-ups of CD Projekt Red knew what the state of the game was in. So, the reviewers were told very specific things so that they can get those launch day sales and what have you. Very suspect things. A damn shame, really. Really, it just really... It honestly kind of hurts to talk about it like this. I really wanted this game to be #1. Or close to #1 at least. At least, to the very least, I wanted this game to be my first good CD Projekt Red game that I played. But it turned out to be my #1 disappointment for 2020. Despite being the funnest game, actually, to play out of all this entire bunch. But because there was so much more on the line in a way, if you compare that 40-minute video of the gameplay reveal to what's reality, what's the final product here, it hurts. It hurts to see what's missed out, what was cut out from the game. It just becomes painfully obvious how much it made it into the final product. Like, honestly, I actually went through that video, and it just hurts to miss out on that stuff. Last of Us Part 2 was actually really close to making it to #1, more ways than one. But at the end of it, my expectations weren't as high as Cyberpunk. And Last of Us Part 2 at least had more polish at launch in comparison. You know, I do find it funny that both of these cases involve with scamming in a way. In Last of Us Part 2, there was that trailer that made Joel appear to be more present in the main story, you know, much longer. You know, the direction was much different because they knew players wanted to see Joel, so they just shoved Joel into that trailer. And they even had refunds issued at some point because of the whole Joel outrage. But at the end of the day, the product ran well on PS4, and you know, of course, aside from the handful of glitches, the polish was there in comparison anyway. Cyberpunk on previous consoles was absolutely unplayable. And they knew that. CD Projekt Red knew that. And so here we are with Cyberpunk 2077 at number 1 disappointing game of 2020 on this list here. Who knows what will become of the future of CD Projekt Red? I mean, who knows? Will those big patches save the game? Will we get those expansions that have players eventually forgive, you know, the company at some point? Who the hell knows? But it should not have happened in the first place. I know they gave out that apology video very recently, you know, being pretty clear, but they're still, you know, kind of shoving certain things on the rug in a way. While I do appreciate the video being made, it should not have happened in the first place. It all goes back to the lesson of games need more time and need to be finished playable by release day, not after. If they only actually released the game, you know, March of this year or something like that, all those bugs would have been mostly gone, probably, or likely. And if that was the case, people wouldn't have been so focused on the game being broken, buggy, glitchy, crashing, and all that. They would have focused on the actual, well, I don't know, the game itself, the immersion, the experience, Keanu Reeves, you know, that would have been fine. That would have been fun to see all those comments, you know, and it could have been way more immersive. It could have been more deep, you know, maybe more endings that are fulfilling. But what we're given here, it needed more time in the oven. That's the obvious lesson here. So that's my disappointing games of 2020, with Cyberpunk 2077 actually taking the top. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell, notify all. That's really how we get to see more videos from this channel. And of course, if you have any comments about what's your top disappointing games of 2020, or worst games at that, please leave them below. Love to check them out. So thank you guys so much. This has been my top 4 disappointing games of 2020. Let's hope that 2021 has a big road to good games. Way more than disappointing games. But there's probably something to be had. But we'll see. We still have a long road ahead of us. And so we can all wait and see. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Sean out.